So please welcome Elle Nestico to the show. Welcome, Elle.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm so excited.
Oh, me too. And all the way from North Carolina.
Yep.
And I want to kind of give a brief how we connected was with Jeannie Winters, and she connected me with you and said what a beautiful person you are and how you wrote a book um, and I just, I think of lately, especially this, my soul tribe is connecting to a place of almost like it's a magnet. And it's like this, it's so cool to watch. It's like you're watching this movie and you're like, oh, of course I'm meeting Elle. Of course Jeannie introduces me to her. And then you start just connecting these dots and I
Yeah.
just already knew I knew you. And it was like that
Yeah.
feeling, just of remembering. And I love it. And
Yeah.
that is why I'm so excited to share you with everyone. And I just
Thank
let's
you.
start.
Thank
So we had our little conversation before. You've been
you.
on a couple of my calls, and now, so give people like I want to talk about your book and how that came about because you have
Sure.
five children, and the fact that they're between the ages of 15 and 3, and you wrote a
Mhm.
book is like amazing to me. I mean, really, I don't understand how that you could even do that. So let's just start with your childhood and kind of give everybody kind of a where you came from and
Sure.
how you were raised and all that.
Sure. So I was actually adopted when I was a few weeks old. And I was born in Northern Virginia, adopted to a family on Capitol Hill in DC. My dad worked on Capitol Hill. And my parents are very scientific based. They're highly educated. They were both professors. My father, we ended up moving to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Go Steelers. Uh, and he was dean of international affairs at Pitt for quite some time. And my mother was a cultural anthropologist, and she had doctorates, and they were, very, held in high esteem. With their jobs, with their careers, we traveled a lot. So I grew up traveling. We lived in Japan, we lived in China, we lived in Australia. I've been to all over Europe. I mean, we've been a lot of places. I'm so fortunate to have been able to have those experiences. Interestingly, being raised in my family with my parents who come from a very, like I said, a very scientific background, but then also traveling and seeing so much of the world and different people, different cultures, different religions, different ideologies, and takes on life. They were both of those really influenced me. On the one hand, even though as a child and since forever, I've always sort of gravitated to the metaphysical. I think, like most children, you know who your parents are, and I just didn't feel like that was something that I could ever pursue or that it was a valid thing to pursue. Um, but then also seeing all of these different religions and the world and all these different people, that really exposed me to lots of different viewpoints. So as I got older and became a mother myself, at some point I was able to sort of get over the hurdle of self-doubt about where my beliefs about the world or the universe or my spirituality. I was able to get over a lot of those hurdles, that maybe that those things weren't valid, or and I was able to really tap into the other part of my youth, which was all these different mindsets. So yeah, so that's sort of how I grew up. And yeah, and now I'm in North Carolina. I somehow ended up with 5 kids. Uh, I actually know how that happened.
I hope so.
Yeah, I actually know how that happened. But so now I'm just, doing the best I can, raising these crazy kids and this crazy family. And yeah, just sort of trying to find myself. I
You
think as
know,
we all are. Yeah.
yes. So being adopted and, knowing what we know, and I know you think the same way, like we pick our parents
Right.
and you picked your parents to be, adopt you.
Mhm.
And, I think of like where what I'm getting from you is like you were raised and it was hard for you to really explore what you're interested in after you kind of leave the nest, right? Because it's
Mhm.
Nestico, your last name, because you're leaving
Nestico.
the
Yeah.
nest, Nestico.
That's right. Right.
So when I think of like, I picked parents, like I look at the way I always look at even the way our kids picked us, right?
Uh-huh.
And how you were supposed to learn the contrast, and it was probably a driving force to you to really search what was really interesting you, but you had to keep it all within your soul to not really share because they wouldn't understand that.
Right. Yeah. Oh, 100%. And even as I got older and I, was starting to get over those self-limiting, beliefs or the beliefs of my family, uh, it was hard for me to share with my friends or anyone. I mean, I think at some point, everyone who leans into their spirituality has sort of an awakening. And I think we all go through some amount of self doubt with that. So, when I went through mine, I definitely thought I was crazy. I
Well, explain
definitely,
what you had an awakening.
oh, yeah. So let's see. Like I said, I've always been very spiritual. I've always believed in something. I didn't know what that was. I still am not quite sure. I'm personally very open to whatever it could be. I think I'm smart enough to know I don't really know anything. But yeah, so when I was 30 or 31, I was 31, and my first batch of kids, they were 3 and under. So I had a 3 year old, a 2 year old, and a newborn. Um, and I was a stay at home mom. We just had too many, before that, I had been a social worker, so that was not going to pay for 3 bouts of daycare. Um, but I was really, really stressed out. I loved my life. I loved my husband. I loved my kids, but I was so anxious. And, being responsible suddenly for all of these children and, these little perfect beings that are so helpless. And it just really, I had a lot of anxiety and I needed to find something to help me through it. Long story, I ended up really sort of leaning into my spirituality. And when I sort of made that conscious decision to say to myself, okay, maybe this is a thing. Maybe I've been denying something my whole life that I've been feeling, but maybe there is something bigger. And, maybe I could really lean on that right now, whatever that is. I started seeing signs and synchronicities and coincidences. And, people would say things to me that they didn't know was, a coincidence and something I had been thinking or feeling. And it really led me down a path of, finding my spiritual voice. But while I did that, I definitely had a lot of self doubt and was like, okay, I've seen this number 9,000 times today. Am I crazy? Am I just looking for it? Am I, I was raised in, like I said, a very, yeah, scientific background. So I definitely, there is a lot of discerning in me, and still, I want to feel confident in what I think I'm seeing is what I actually think I'm seeing. And so I love to listen to all sorts of metaphysical people, thoughts, ideologies. Um, for me, I end up taking what I feel like resonates with me. Um, and, some things I don't, which honestly, I think we all should. Because I don't think spirituality is a one size fits all. Um,
Right.
but
What
yeah,
was your like? So I picture you with three babies, and you're, of course, that's a lot for
yeah,
anybody. I mean, I can't imagine.
yeah,
But and the age differences aren't that, big of a gap. When you
right.
say like you just started to realize like I need to hold on to, or, really go into my spiritual side and find peace with that to help my anxiety, what are you
Mhm.
doing? Between naps, are you like reading books? Are you looking at videos? What are you doing?
No, well, okay. So the story goes, I'll make it pretty short. But I had a lot of anxiety. I brought Johnny home. He was perfect and sweet in this little bundle of mush. And I had my little 3 year old and my little 2 year old, and they were so sweet and, perfect. And yeah, I had a lot of anxiety. My husband worked at that time. I mean, he was working a lot and he was traveling 3 nights a week. That started when we brought John home. Um, I was really, really stressed out just trying to keep it all together. And as well as I think all most young moms or older moms, I think we go through this period where we think we have to be perfect. And I really thought I had to be perfect. That was not helping my stress. I thought I had to look perfect. My house had to be perfect. I had to be the perfect mom and the perfect wife. And that was just crazy of me. But I, really put that stress on myself. Anyway, one night, Ronnie was traveling and I was washing the baby. I had washed the girls. I had put them each in their room, so that they could read their books and they were in their pajamas and get ready for bed. And so I brought John out of the bathroom. I was getting him dressed and I heard my little 2 year old giggling. And she giggled a lot, but I knew that there was something with that giggle. I had a feeling and I walked into her room and the entire room, all four walls, her comforter, her carpet, every single toy she had was covered in diarrhea.
Oh my
She had
gosh.
been, she had, I have never seen so much excrement from anything ever, especially this little 2 year old sweet little fairy girl. And she was having the time of her life, just like painting everything she could in diarrhea. She's head to toe. I
Oh,
burst into tears. I cried for hours. I, washed her. I put her in her pajamas. I put her in her sister's room. The kids were okay. But I mean, it must have taken me days to get everything washed, and I cried through all of it. And that night, I just went to bed just so emotionally exhausted. And I prayed, and I hadn't prayed maybe ever in my life. I've always been spiritual, but I've never been particularly religious. Um, so I guess I just never, it just didn't seem like something that was for me. But I prayed and I didn't know who I was praying to and I didn't know what I was praying for. I just needed help. And I had a dream, and it was really vivid, but all it was there were hands that were holding my hands. And when I woke up, everything was different. And I just really felt like I wasn't alone. And from that day on, yeah, I think I just started reading books. I started out with how I think a lot of people start out, uh, The Universe Has My Back, The Seed of the Soul. It went into Oprah had a really good book with interviews of
Yeah,
So
I have
I
that
can
too.
remember that book. Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I just really started out reading, and I did read during nap time. And that really helped me. And it really sort of helped me solidify what I had been feeling my whole life, but what I had mentally pushed away. And that
Right.
was really, I just really I needed to lean into myself, and I never looked back.
So let's go into your book because it's it's a fiction book.
Yes.
And but when you read it and I see your writing and it's like I'm there, the golden retriever, like it's so you write so beautifully.
Thank you.
So when I think of, oh, I'm going to write a book with diarrhea all over the walls, like what are you, what is inspiring you to do that? And I want you to go into the book and what
Okay.
kind of, you know, the light bulb went on and said, okay, I'm going to write about this amazing, I mean, the story is so creative. So, and
Thank
there's
you.
truth to it too, right?
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of the book is pulled directly from my life, from the people in my life. The some A lot of the stories within the story are mine. The story itself isn't mine. Does that
Right.
make sense? I
Yes.
took all these different pieces from my life and sort of rearranged them to tell a different story. But if you read the book, you pretty much know me. um, So, I mean, I've been writing my whole life as a means of, I think, not just entertainment for myself, but to help me process emotions, feelings, traumas, anything, joys. I've just always written. Journaling never came easily to me, ever. So, writing in the third person, I think, always helped me step outside of myself to be able to work through these things, if that makes any sense.
Yeah. Huh,
Um,
interesting.
yeah, so I have always done that since I can remember. I mean, on my computer, I couldn't even tell you how many stories I have. But halfway through writing this one, well, I started writing this one. I turned 40, and my girlfriends turned 40, and we just sort of started having conversations, epiphanies about our lives. We were looking backwards and looking at things that we've done or paths that we've taken, and wondering out loud and to ourselves, what might have happened if I had done that? What would have come of that? Would it have been good? Would it have been bad? Um, I was pregnant at 40 with my last baby. Um, but interestingly, when you have a newborn, you're not busy, but there were a lot of like middle of the night, like 3 o'clock feedings that I was awake pondering over my life. So I think just in those questions that I found myself and my friends asking ourselves and being introspective, I just started writing a story about it. And maybe halfway through is when I sort of had a light bulb that maybe other women, especially, but people can relate to this book, and it might be really helpful. Um, it's definitely metaphysical. It's a romance. It's sort of a romantasy, right? But I actually see it in the way that I wrote it was more of a medium to get across my metaphysical wonderings and ideas, and sort of like, you know, creativity.
So Emmy is
Hmm.
the character. So
Yeah.
so when I'm reading it, and I have not read the whole thing, so I can't pretend. But when I was reading it, what I've read is you like this. I want to know why that, because I can see your questioning. I can see why now understanding you and knowing you. Like when you
Mhm.
put the story together, like what is that part of your explain how, like at the beginning, when explain kind of the gist of your it's the main kind of plot.
Okay. So the story is a woman, happily married, 3 kids. It's her 40th birthday. Life is easy. It's sweet. It's not perfect, for sure. Especially, I mean, as life is, marriage isn't perfect. Kids aren't perfect, but she's happy. She has friends. She has family. Life is solid. Um, on her 40th birthday, she runs into the one that got away, that she hasn't seen or talked to for 20 years. Um, and that experience of her running into him kicks off a whole spiritual awakening for her, where she learns, so much about the universe, time, timelines, choices, but also her connectedness to this person. They are soulmates. But in this lifetime, they're not supposed to be together. So then she gets into this conundrum of, ultimately, do I choose my family and my happiness and this wonderful life that I've built, or do I choose this soul who, for eternity or for thousands of lifetimes, or for a really long time, is the one that is my one true soulmate.
Right. So let's go there. So I talk about timelines all the time. I'm getting to be more I can wrap my head around it a lot more and understanding it's all happening right now.
Yeah.
And so when you say that, so if you had the soulmate and you're now in your 40s, like, I'm looking at it like you wrote this, so there's something in your soul that's that relates to this story, right?
Yeah.
So you're seeing it. So explain to me how you view that. Like you could find this guy that 20 years ago that that's your soulmate, right?
Okay.
And you're at 40, but you're
Yeah.
still you're what Emmy's doing, lives her perfect life. So
Hmm.
is that going on? Are you in that life with this guy somewhere in another timeline? And you're having this other life now with your husband now? Like, and you're just like reconnecting and realizing, oh, wow, how does that work with you? How does he come in and how does that, how do
How do
you,
the two timelines
yeah,
relate
how do
to
you
each
see it? Yes.
So in the book, they are, Emmy and this, her soulmate, Jesse. They are offered an opportunity to rewrite history, but not necessarily in time travel, like the way that we think about time travel or have been explained about time travel, where you like get in a capsule and rewind things. Um, they get the opportunity to rewrite another timeline. So when I was writing this book, I was, there were a lot of things happening. I turned 40. I'm questioning, I'm looking back on my life. I'm questioning certain things. I'm really happy about certain things. I wonder about other things. I'm also simultaneously, I had gotten like really sort of consumed with the idea of time. I watched a Netflix documentary. I had read Astrophysics for Dummies. I got like really into it, especially when I learned that there's this theory that time is not consecutive, it's concurrent. And that took me a minute to like really kind of be able to take that in. Um, and that the idea behind that is that time is not, a linear series, but it just feels that way as our souls are brought through it. But ultimately, it's more like a novel, which is already written, the whole thing, start to finish. We are just going through it page by page. And that really inspired a lot of this book and really let me go down a whole rabbit hole of then, okay, so if they're given, if they're on this timeline and this is their life, and this is their life story, but the universe gives them an opportunity to rewrite or write another timeline than what
Hmm.
happens to this one. So I sort of philosophize that this one is still there in its entirety, but it's just our consciousness that's now over here. So
Right.
this one is still going on, but this one is what we're aware of.
Right. Where we
Makes sense?
focus. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, totally. I'm very much on that path because,
Yeah.
I'm going to talk about this again because I've talked about it in the last few episodes, but I had this regression where I saw time as a piano keys, as a piano, and you could hit every key and hit a life, right? And you were getting things from each life and where you're focused on is in
Mhm.
right now in this human body. And this is an illusion and a dream.
Mhm.
So this isn't even real.
Mhm.
But we've created this consciousness to
Mhm.
focus here to have this experience. But now I'm going to ask you this question. So we're now in this focused consciousness of Elle and Ashley speaking right now. But
Okay.
you in this consciousness are
Mhm.
changing all the other piano keys in my the way I can reference it now because it helps me understand.
Yeah.
You can change all those, generational, ancestral trauma, whatever, all those things that you've created in those timelines.
Mhm.
Because you're focused right now in this life as Elle,
Mhm.
you have the power because you're focused with your consciousness now
Mhm.
to affect all the other piano keys.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. That's definitely something else that is talked about in the book is the difference. What is free will? What does that mean? And what can it affect? And what can't it affect? Again, I philosophize that free will is absolutely a thing. That there are some things that we are fated for in this life that maybe we signed up for, like our parents before we came. But there are some things that that will just happen, but that destiny is how we choose to get there. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
And that, there are some things that we might be fated for, like Emmy is fated to marry her husband, not this other guy.
Right.
So they're given the opportunity then to start a new timeline from 20 years previous to when they met and branch off a whole new dimension of life because their free will changed their fate. Does that make sense?
Yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So when I was 20, in my late 20s, I got married. Okay, I'm just visualizing this kind of
Sure.
reflecting on how you wrote this book. And
Yeah.
I can go back to that moment, and we were only married for a year,
Mhm.
and that timeline could still be going on, and I could be married to him.
Yeah, somewhere else. And it's possible. I mean, all things are possible, but I surmise that it's possible that, yeah, that timeline is still going on, but you, for whatever reason, chose to or are in this timeline right now in your consciousness. So there might be a part of your soul that is in that other timeline, and that other timeline is playing out the way that it's playing out, the way that you had set it up for, or maybe not. Maybe you decided to, do something else and then thus create another timeline. Who knows? But that your consciousness, for whatever reason, is here with your now husband and your beautiful daughters in California on this podcast.
Right. So when you now understanding what you do know at um, this stage of the game, because
Yeah.
it is a game, and I have, I used to read. I read all the time The Game of Life and How to Play It. Did you ever read that?
Yes.
Okay, that used to be my favorite book.
Yeah.
Florence Scovel Shinn, The Game of Life and How to Play It. And I really related to that. But when you've realized that, you know, there is free will, and decided to leave that marriage, and I
Mhm.
had, you know, and I look back and I now understanding timelines and reading your book and
Mhm.
knowing that I'm conscious in this body, in this family, because this is where I'm going to learn the most lessons. Is that how you, is
Yeah,
that
well,
why I'm picking that?
I don't know. We learn lessons with everything,
Right.
and I don't know that it's necessarily the most. They may be the lessons that chose, or not. I I don't know why you might be in this timeline. I don't really. I feel like I have a lot of theories about things, but there are some that I sort of stop and say, okay, I have no idea.
Right. But
I don't know.
like we're here for the highest growth, right? That's our
Yeah,
souls like craves this growth and highest expansion.
absolutely.
And so I'm looking at it now and it's new now because I didn't think of this before until meeting you. So I look at my consciousness decides to take this Y in the road
Hmm.
because I know that if I'm going to focus in this body, in this
Hmm.
consciousness, I'm going to have the tools around me. The children are going to pick me that are going to be for my highest growth and expansion.
Yeah.
And I'm going to be able to um, accomplish more with my my focus here than I would have in any of those right now,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. Yeah, I think that's absolutely possible. It's also possible that you're in this timeline for karmic reasons, though,
Right,
which is one of the reasons why Emmy and Jesse are not together. Their karma from past lives together is playing out so that they are not supposed to be together this time. So I think that there's a myriad of different reasons why we are where we are. Um, I think they're all subjective and relative, and I think that our lives are so complex and multifaceted that there's usually more than one reason also.
right, right. How do you look at God? What is God to you?
That's a tricky question for me. I personally do not look at God as a man in the clouds with like a trident, like what's his name? King Trident, King Ariel's father. I don't know.
Yeah, I know what you're
That's
talking
not,
about. I don't either, but
yeah, that's not how I see it. Um, like I said, there are some things that I have sort of stopped myself from really getting into thus far. And the most I can say about what I think God is currently is whatever higher being, universe, thing, reason that we're here. I don't know why that is or what that is. In the book, it goes into past lives, current lives, future lives, and also in between lives. Um, but why for all of this, or who did all of this? I don't know. I don't know.
explain in between lives.
So I think it's I think it's safe to say that if you believe in past lives, and future lives, then there has to be something in between, right? Um, so for me, I wrote the in between lives as I think it's called the in between in the book, and it is really um, a classroom. It's a dimension. It's a different dimension that when we are not incarnated, that's where our consciousness is. And it's really like a big classroom with all sorts of soulmates, not just romantic, but all sorts of soulmates that we have. And we're there learning. And really, when we are incarnated, that's just us having a field trip. Does that make sense?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So the in between for me is some place of higher learning.
Right. But we're there now. too.
Yeah, we might. Yeah, a part of us. Sure.
Right. So when you sat down with Jeannie and your husband found her, right? Like explain
Yeah.
that connection. And, when you talk about your age, because I've learned so much from her with human design and how 40 is a big year,
Yeah.
right? Like, and then when you were 30, I don't know, there's just certain things that you
Hmm.
brought up in this interview that I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I bet she learned so much about why those things came up
Yeah.
into your timeline right now.
Absolutely. Yeah. So one of my really close friends, as you know, you are too, Jeannie, she is a human design expert. She's an astrologer. She's wonderful. And we've had so many conversations, and she likes to get my chart out every time we have coffee.
Oh, fun. You're so lucky you get to be close to her. And most people know who she is because she's been on this podcast and
Right.
and I blew
Right.
her up. So
Oh, good. Yeah, she did say that. That's great. Yeah. So Jeannie and I, so it just in all of our conversations, coffee talk. Uh, yeah, 40 was a big turning point, is a big turning point for me and for a lot of people. Uh, she sort of validated what I had felt, and one of the reasons that I wrote the book was that milestone is before that, our lives have been about collecting data,
Mhm.
really. And at sort of the midlife milestone, that's when we take a second, like a hot minute, to look at the data and all of the information that we've collected. And then going into our 50s, then that's when I'm pretty sure she said going into our 50s, that's when we put that to use and find our soul's purpose. So when I turned 40, that was before Jeannie and I became friends. Was starting to have these, late night 3 a.m. feeding epiphanies about my life, and and my girlfriends were, and I was noticing, I was having a baby, but I was also noticing that a lot of my other friends, not just girlfriends, but guy friends too, were making really big life changes. One of my best friends left her husband, who she had been, really unhappy with. And it had taken her a long time to leave him. But at some point, she turned 40 and was like, I'm done with this. I had another really good friend. He was really successful in IT, left it all to go to med school.
Mm.
And, I said to him, I told him how proud I was of him. And he said, I just felt like I just needed to do what I wanted to do. And leading up to that age for us, yeah, it really was about trial and error, what made us happy, what didn't make us happy. Well, I'm going to listen to my parents, and I'm going to not acknowledge my, inner feelings of the universe or manifestation or, metaphysics. And then at some point you're like, why would I ignore that? That's who I am. Or we have all these self-limiting beliefs that we sort of accrue over our lives. I think some we inherit either through epigenetics or nurture. Um, and then I think, when we get to midlife, we just are tired of not being us. And
Right.
yeah, and then I think that that's when you sort of step into your power. And I think if things have not been going great, that's when you see a lot of people making big life choices. Uh, I think one of the themes in the book is about, I think it's sort of, without saying it, challenges the idea of aging. You know, I'm 43 now. I'm still really young. I'm young. I'm fun. I'm still cool. My kids do not think so. I do not care what they say. I like, you have no idea how cool I am. But I think that we just need to step into our power. And I think once we do, we really can find our true selves and our true meaning. I don't think that people generally have midlife crisis, right? I think generally we have a midlife renaissance or a
Mm,
midlife rebirth.
right.
Um, if you might see someone who's driving what's the stereotype, like a midlife man driving some like really flashy sports car. Well, maybe he's just wanted that car his whole life. And
Right.
he's like, what am I doing? I'm going to go buy my car.
Right.
Um, yeah. So
That's okay.
sorry.
That's okay.
That's the school bus
Oh,
alarm.
oh,
Yeah. Um, but yeah, so I think that there is a lot of truth uh, to Jeannie's teachings about the decades of our lives and the patterns of our lives and why we have them and what we're supposed to do with them.
right. So I don't know. So I want you to explain, I look at my life as like, my girls picked me. I picked my parents. I see why that they played the role that they did
Mm-hmm.
for me to get to where I am now and what I find like as for an example in parenting, for an example.
Okay.
So what I was raised with, I knew what I needed to do differently to
Mm-hmm.
raise them what I felt like I was missing, right? Like so all these things and I was a conscious parent because of
Mm-hmm.
that. And I know that's part of my soul's purpose, right? So as a as an adopted child, how
Mm-hmm.
do you see like cuz you had parents that picked you and
Mm-hmm.
didn't have you. So there's no DNA, there's no genetic, predisposition that you can say, oh, that's because my mom. So from the higher picture, from this higher perspective, from the
Mm-hmm.
spiritual lens, how do you see your people that are adopted and
Mm-hmm.
what their lesson is? Like do you have a bigger like what is that for you when you look at that?
My lesson in being adopted.
Well, yeah, just like why do you think that was what you chose as a soul to come and say, okay, I'm going to come down through this woman, and then this couple is going to find,
I'll belong to them.
right,
That's a good question. I feel very much the same in that I chose my parents, um, my adoptive parents. Uh, they, but I think I chose them in a specific way to not have their DNA. We are so different. And that was part of why I chose them and why they needed me. Um, we have influenced each other in so many ways. You know, not all of them are great, especially when I was a teenager and we were so different. That was really hard. Um,
in what
I
way? Explain that.
well, so I'm a really emotional being, and my parents, by virtue of their parents and their parents
Right.
and their lineage, their own generational traumas that they've inherited through epigenetics or through nurture. Uh, because I don't have those things, I can see them, I think, a lot clearer in them because
Mm,
I'm not plagued by them myself.
right. That's so
Um,
good. Yes, I see
yeah.
that.
So that, but I think just like you, I chose them so that I could go through the things that I did partially so that I could be a really um, uh, conscious parent and raise my children in ways that I felt like I needed. And I think that I think part of the reason that I chose them, was because we were so different and it was to be different. Uh, I, I think a lot of people can feel the same and that I was definitely the black sheep of the family for a while. And, but I also was the generational trauma breaker. That doesn't, it occurred to me not that long ago that even though the ones that break the generational traumas, even though we do, that's a really major role to play, and that takes a lot of energy and effort. That doesn't mean that they didn't either, though.
Right.
That just means that we don't know the traumas that they may have broken because they then didn't come to us.
Right.
So I think it's important that we not blame our parents or our families for certain things, but that we just try to understand.
Right.
Um,
Okay. Oh gosh, hold on. Sorry, just finish that because I just got an amazing epiphany.
sure. Yeah. And that we just try to understand that we choose not everything, but we do choose a lot of these trials and tribulations and lessons that we go through. And regardless of if we choose them or we don't, we're still going through them. And I think that in some ways it's really important to be able to see your generational trauma, um, and to be able to see the patterns in your family. But in other ways, I think also maybe that's not as important, because if you know that it's there, regardless of where it came from, then it's your responsibility to try to stop it from then going to the next generation, to the next
Right.
children, to the next grandchildren, and so on.
Well, you had five children pick you, so they were like lining up. I gotta go to her because we're gonna be amazing team.
I hope so. Thank you. Yeah.
But so going back to this thought of mine. So
Sure.
speaking of timelines, there's a timeline that you stayed with the mother that
Yeah.
had you, and now you're in that life with her,
I'm somewhere
right?
else. Yeah. And I'm not with my husband or my children. I wouldn't be me if I had stayed with her. Her name was Suzanne. I was able to talk to her a couple times in my life as an adult. She was a lovely lady. Uh, yeah, if I had stayed with her, I mean, who knows who and where I would be and what lessons I would have gone through, and, you know, hardships or privileges, I don't know, who knows, but there definitely could be somewhere where she and I are still together. And of course, then that wouldn't have just changed my life. That would have changed hers, her family's, people that I potentially would have been friends with, my potential then husband, children, family. I mean, it just branches off in so many different directions.
Right. Yeah. So that is so fascinating. And I think the more that, the people keep saying the veil is so thin, or we're, seeing the real truth of who we really are, the power that
Yeah.
we are, right? As a soul, as a human being, living this life and understanding, like I feel like, okay, it's time for us like open up the codes. We're ready. Like this, we need to realize our power.
Yeah.
And, and as a parent, I want to ask you how you parent and how you have this marriage with these five children and what you instill in your children and giving them, I think these days with, it's not how we were raised. The social
Mhm.
media, the technology, all this, I always look back at these videos on Instagram, like the 80s, there you could tell that your friends were at their house because all the bikes were in the front yard, and we were outside until the lights on the street went on, and then we went home. It's just such a different way of, raising children when we didn't have what they have, and understanding technology, phones, um, and really like knowing who we are. As I raise these girls, I'm like, you guys are so powerful. Like if you knew you could do anything, like, and you can, but I don't want you to grow up with this thought of, these limiting beliefs, and being aware of those things that I've, and everyone has a childhood, and We've all been
Hmm.
raised a certain way where there's not, and nothing's perfect. Well, it's all
Right.
perfect because I feel like everything is always for you. So it's for
Yeah.
your highest good. But
Yeah.
explain how, I mean, having five children alone is amazing. I mean, and yes, and five people were lined up five souls came into that little body of yours to share this consciousness human timeline together for
Yeah.
something. But
Yeah.
go into that and explain your marriage and how that you incorporate all this together, and then we'll end. I could go
Sure.
on.
Yeah. So Ronnie and I, we've been married we're going on 17 years, which is crazy because I am still 25. I don't know how how
Yeah.
that happened, but I guess, time may not be relative. So maybe that's how. Yeah, we've been married for 17 years. He is my best friend. We are really close. We've only gotten closer as we've gotten older, which is amazing because I think so many times it's so easy to let life, take you this way instead of this way. Um, our children, yeah, I mean, we're just really on a wing and a prayer over here, trying to help them be the best that they can be and grow into their power and know who they are. I do think, I mean, there were really wonderful things about the way that I was raised and my family and the way that but like you said, nothing's ever perfect. There were definitely a lot of things that I wish that I would have known or had, or a different kind of relationship with my mother or father or whatever. And yeah, I'm really cognizant, and he is too. We both are, and we have many conversations. We're very cognizant of the things that we needed. And actually, it might have been a year or two ago, not that long ago, I had an epiphany on a walk that even though I didn't have the mother relationship that I desperately wanted, um, A, that really set me up to have that now. I have that with my kids now. They know that they can come to me with anything. They know that I validate their feelings and I hear them and I believe them, and that I am here to help them through everything. Yeah, I might get mad at them about some stuff, but we'll deal with that after we get through whatever we need to get through. Um, so we're really cognizant of trying to give them what it was that we needed. But the second thing that I realized on that walk was, like you said, I do think that everything that happens is for us. Um, Even if it just feels terrible or not at all, but in some way, in some fashion, at some point down the road, it, there's a reason. And I realized on that walk that though I didn't have the mother that I wanted when I was growing up, I was that mother for me that I wanted. There was a higher part of me. I'm the one that got me through all those things and comforted myself and told myself to keep going, and that it was going to be okay, and that, I'm the one. There was another part of me that gave me what it was that I needed to get there. And we all have that in us.
Right. That was a mic drop. I love that. Okay, so let's talk about how people can find you, your
Yeah.
book, and all that.
So my book is called The Rest of My Lives. It is a metaphysical love story. Like I said, it's a little beach read romanticy. I think it's light and fun, but it is also really deep at the same time. Um, that's on Amazon right now. Pretty soon it'll be in bookstores, so that's exciting. Uh,
Very.
I'm on Instagram. I'm on Facebook. Author Elle Nestico, and yeah, I have a website www.elnestico.com. And yeah, I'm here. I'm writing another book, and I'm excited to, share my thoughts and feelings, and to hear other people's.
What inspired you to write another book? Like what was your like on your walk a moment where like, oh, I'm gonna write a book on this.
Yeah, well, actually, so this next book is about generational trauma, which is interesting that we were talking about it. And it was actually inspired a lot by a lot of the feelings that we were just talking about, where certain traumas and triggers come from, and, either uh, physically or spiritually, emotionally, how we get through them. It's a fiction book, just like this one, but it does talk about all of these wonderful topics that we were just on, coincidentally. And yeah, I started writing it again just for myself, just to, really put onto paper what my feelings and thoughts are. I am the kind of person that I have a trillion thoughts a minute, and they all just sort of get jumbled. And it's really only when I can pull them out one by one very purposefully and put them down on the computer, on a piece of paper, on a note in my phone, that's when I can really start to understand what that thought or download or whatever just was, and take it from there. So yeah,
Wow.
it came really organically, just like the rest of my lives, and I'm excited about that.
When do you you have a 3-year-old? Like when do you have the time? I mean, 3-year-old besides your other children, your other
Yeah,
four,
yeah.
to write a book like that? Like what do you is it a discipline? Do you have a set time? Is it
But
just
no,
something that you love so much that it's just like so it just you can't wait?
I think honestly, I'm just really passionate about it. I've also been a mom for 15 years, and at some point, I was like, I'm going to do what I want to do. Also, I want to be a wife. I want to be a mother. I want to do these things for them, because it's not just for them, it's for me too. But I also want something else. And when I found out that I was pregnant again at 39, I had a little bit of a crisis, I think, at, like, oh my God, I thought I was getting my life back. And then at some point I was like, no, I have my life. It's not getting it back. I have it. I just have all these wonderful kids too. I also am really blessed that I have an amazing husband. Um, and he really, he's just as much of a parent partner as I am. And, he knows that I have championed his career for the last 17 years, 20 years now. And so he has really jumped in and ready to help me champion mine. And so he says, I'll take the kids to the park, or, you can go upstairs, or you can go to Panera or Starbucks or wherever, and, do whatever
Oh,
you need to do. So yeah, I'm really passionate about it, and I'm lucky that I've been able to find 20 minutes here and 20 minutes there.
yeah. How long does it take you to write how did long did it take you to write the first book?
Well, once I decided I was going to publish it, it went a lot faster. Once I decided I wasn't just going to leave it on my computer and just sort of like, doodle about it every now and then. I would say it took me start to finish a year. Um, and yeah, this one I started not that long ago, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know, with this sleep regression that this cute little 3-year-old's having, it might take me a while.
Oh, I love it. Oh, it's so fun, Elle. Thank you so
Thank
much
you.
for
Thank you so
being
much
here.
for having me. Yeah,
Oh, you're so welcome. I can't wait to meet in person
I
one
know.
day, and I
Yeah,
know we will.
yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.